Whew. Hope you feel as refreshed as me. Let's get into part two of our video lecture here on Wednesday. Again, make sure you're getting your quiz done today. That's the most important thing. Get your points in, get your quiz done over part one of your vocab. So we got about three more slides and a picture slide to talk about here in day three, part two of our video lecture. And we just finished up talking about Birmingham and Birmingham becoming desegregated, how the country saw this and watched in horror to it, and how children were used to help promote the civil rights movement. And so now we're going to shift to some other areas where the civil rights movement is really gaining ground. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. inspires a nation with his dream. You guys probably know what I'm talking about. His I Have a Dream speech. This took place in 1963 during the March on Washington. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. gave his I Have a Dream speech in front of the Lincoln Memorial. And obviously it's very symbolic. President Lincoln, the great emancipator, the person who fought for the 13th Amendment, and obviously was a leader of our country during the Civil War to help free African Americans of the bonds of slavery. Here he stands in front of a free man, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., and he's giving this dream speech about how equality is a dream that he hopes to achieve in his lifetime, how people are going to be able to live and work together in peaceful harmony, and it's something, a vision that the person behind him, Abraham Lincoln, had when he was trying to pass the 13th Amendment and trying to reunify the country. So you just seen how it's went forward generations. And now instead of a president doing, it's an African-American leader and a well-educated African-American in the community that's pushing the same dream that Abraham Lincoln had for a society. Kennedy was all for civil rights. After his assassination, though, his vice president, LBJ, Lyndon B. Johnson, pushed just as hard. And a lot of people find that strange because Kennedy was from Massachusetts, which makes sense. A northern state. He's a Democrat. He's all for civil rights movement and equality. Johnson, they can't believe because he's from Texas. And so you're like, man, someone from Texas, someone from the South, Confederate state, is for civil rights. Well, Johnson's upbringing, he was poor. And so he was a poor white Southerner who faced a lot of the same persecution and ridicule that African Americans did. And so he resents that rich, white, aristocratic, white Southern Democrat that believes in Confederate ideology. And so he is going to push just as hard for the civil rights movement. On July 2nd, 1964, the Civil Rights Act of 1964 is passed. This banned discrimination on the basis of race, sex, religion, or national origin. So pretty much this is like the all-encompassing Civil Rights Act in 1964, saying you cannot discriminate based on pretty much anything about them. You cannot discriminate them upon. All right, so this is the foundation block in 1964 for the civil rights movement and to stop discrimination. Now, marching for the right to vote, the Freedom Summer. We talked about freedom rides last unit, about interstate transport and people riding together, white and African American, to make sure that they have those freedoms. Well, let's get everyone the right to vote in the South. That's another big thing, because if more African Americans have the right to vote, then they're going to have more representation, which is going to help push along the civil rights litigation. So in the Freedom Summer is a campaign to register African American voters in Mississippi, obviously a state which we've seen with James Meredith, we saw with Ole Miss, very deeply held in their white Southern traditions. Student activists disappeared in Neshoba County, Mississippi, while they were down there trying to help get African Americans registered to vote. James Chaney, Andrew Goodman, and Michael Schwerner were all murdered. So you have these white and African Americans that are killed, that are part of this peace group, that are going down to help register, which is well within the rights. People are doing this today to help get people registered to vote, African Americans. Okay? They want to be part of the process, part of the electoral process. African Americans marched from Selma to Montgomery, Alabama after this incident to show their unity and to show their strength. And this just goes to show you, even though this group was from the North, these white Southerners saw them as one and the same. There was an African American in the car. There were two whites in the car. They saw the white men from the North just as bad as the African American men, because they were trying to help push the advancement of African Americans. So if you were a white Northerner and you were trying to help, they didn't care. They saw you as an equal to the African American. And so the Ku Klux Klan would still persecute, ridicule them, and even kill them. A lot of times this would end with lynchings. The Voting Rights Act of 1965 is passed, which outlawed literacy tests and also a federal intervention in registering voters in southern states to get more African Americans involved in the electoral process. So now that literacy tests are out, poll tax are unconstitutional, and the only thing that's really restricting what's happening is gerrymandering. But the more African Americans we can get put in place and put in power in these southern states, they can end the gerrymandering. So it's a step in the right direction. Again, you're not going to be able to solve everything with one act or one movement. It's going to take time. It's going to go piece by piece. So from Watts to Newark, riots in the streets. By the 1960s, almost 70% of African Americans lived in large cities. All right? They had moved out of the rural South and they had moved to major urban areas. Why? Because that's where the work was. That's where the factories were. That's where if you are a skilled or unskilled laborer, you can find a job. African Americans were often concentrated in ethnic ghettos. So areas started popping up around cities like Chicago's South Side, Brooklyn, areas like that in these major cities that were ethnic areas just for African Americans. You're going to see the same thing for Asian immigrants like Chinatowns and things like that, or Italian immigrants, Little Italy, or Mexican immigrants coming into the United States. But there's a larger number of African Americans in the United States, so these ethnic ghettos that are created around these cities have more people and have a larger concentration. In August 1965, a race riot exploded in Watts, and the riot was caused by police brutality. You know, something that's still happening today. If you look back a few years ago to Ferguson, Missouri, and Baltimore, you're seeing cases of police brutality against minority groups, in this case African Americans, that are creating riots, that are causing chaos in these towns, and causing resentment between the two groups. There's a lot of distrust between minority groups and law enforcement, which really shouldn't be there, because this is a group that's there to protect every American citizen, right? And what ends up happening is you have one person who has one ideology that may act a certain way that gives a bad name to the rest of the group. And this happens in Watts, and it happens in California. It happens, obviously, as we talked about in Ferguson. It happens in New York. It happens in Baltimore. So it happens all over because, as we know in society, not all people are the same, right? There are people with different ideology, people with different beliefs that you're going to run into. So even though the standard should be that all people are treated equally and created equally, that's not always going to happen. And as you go out into the world and you guys go to different places and you go to big cities, you're going to see people with different ideologies and treat people differently based on the way they look or their skin color or their beliefs. And it'll be very eye-opening to you when you go to these larger areas and you see this concentration of groups in different areas and their beliefs of different people. The riot lasted 6 days. 34 people were killed, which is a lot of people to be killed in a riot. $45 million worth of property damage occurs. So not only is there death, but there's also destruction. Innocent businesses are completely brutalized and looting takes place. And so our towns and our cities are just like going into complete chaos. It's anarchy. All right. So we need someone and something to take control. And more than likely, that's going to be the United States military. The military is going to get called in because, again, they've been desegregated for a long time. They're impartial, and they're going to be able to go in and put in place their beliefs, their standards of life, and create a peaceful situation. Over 100 cities experienced violent protests. In Detroit, Michigan, 43 people were killed, and that's probably the most violent protest that we saw. There's actually a Netflix documentary based on that protest that happened in Detroit that just came out a few months ago. So if you have some downtime, you go ahead and watch that. It's really good on showing the brutality that was occurring between local law enforcement in Detroit in the 1960s and the African American community. especially in African American ghettos that were surrounding the city of Detroit. Now, our last slide for today, you see some of the destruction that occurred from the riots. African American stores, white stores, stores of all different races and beliefs are destroyed from these riots. Okay, so the destruction wasn't centered just around one specific group or was for one specific person. Everyone occurred this. All right. Now, that's it for video lecture 2 for today on Wednesday. Make sure you get your quiz done. Tomorrow I'll have a video message telling you what you're doing on Thursday, but you're getting some of that quick write done on the discussion board. Remember, keep posting comments, keep asking questions. I'll be there to answer them. Continue to work through your reading questions. I would start on part 2 of your vocab as well. Your quiz on that is on Friday, so make sure you're working through those 11 terms. I'll come back to you on a quick video for Thursday, just with some reminders on what you're doing for Thursday. And we'll have a video lecture on Friday. We'll finish up our video lectures on Monday, and then we'll wrap up civil rights. All right, guys? I hope you guys are enjoying the sunshine and stuff. Get outside, take a walk, do something like that. But miss seeing you guys every day in class. Have a great Wednesday. All right? Changed up the outfit, went gray pants today. All right? So, hope you guys enjoy. Have a great Wednesday. Happy hump day. I'll see you guys. Take it easy.